Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Apologies for the scratchy voice. Still getting over a really bad chest cold and pretty much losing my voice. So anywho, Waffle Flowers August 2019 release went live, and there are more swatch stamp sets and coordinating dies being released, and I'm eons behind with swatching all of the things, but I started today, or well, I started when I started filming this. Anyway, I'm using the Color Swatches for Watercolor stamp set. This was actually released previously, but with this month's release, there's now a coordinating die set, which I thought was really cool. So what I did was I cut down some Canson XL watercolor paper just into like 2 by 6 inch strips, basically just big enough to stamp this row of circles from the Color Swatches for Watercolors. And I stamped this multiple times onto the watercolor paper using my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And then once I had them all stamped, I am going to fill them all in with all of my Tonic Nuvo Aqua Flow brush pens. I have finally got my hands on all the ones that were available. I had most of them, but then decided, well, of course, you have to have all the colors because I'm a full set syndrome person. So once I had them, I wasn't sure at first what I was going to do. Like, I was thinking of maybe like putting them in kind of rainbow order. And I started kind of overwhelming myself with like, how am I going to do this right the first time? I was like, you know what? No, I'm just going to put them in basically the number order from how they were released. There's numbers on the sides. So I laid them all out left to right in that number order. And that's how I'm going to fill in each of these little sets, just working from left all the way to right. So each one holds 5 colors because there's 5 circles, and it just so happened to work out perfectly that, you know, I've got 30 of these Aquaflow brush pens, so I just filled in each one. And I did end up at one point, and I didn't realize, of course, until I was labeling, I did end up mixing up 2 markers so they aren't in perfect order, but same thing. I'm just going with it because the big thing with swatches, and it's something I know and I tell everyone else to do, I need to practice myself, is it makes such a huge difference with almost all coloring mediums to actually have them swatched out, whether it just be a simple, you know, squiggle on a piece of cardstock with, you know, the name, whatever, or, you know, more in-depth charts like this, or you can even get into, like Waffle Flower had released like the color wheel ones, which are tons of fun. Like, the options are becoming completely unlimited with these Waffle Flower releases, and just what all you can do with swatching and getting to know your coloring mediums, your inks, etc. And it makes a huge difference because even just this, doing this with these really gave me a chance to kind of see how these look on watercolor paper, you know, all these different colors, because some of them I had recently purchased and I hadn't even like used yet. So it was nice to see what those colors were, and especially some of the darker colors that look, the little bands on the brushes, you know, they look very similar. But then once I got them on the cardstock, I was like, oh, these are very like different colors. And I'm a very visual person. I like to see all the things. So having swatches like this, now that I've dipped my toes in, I'm going to have to do a lot more because obviously I also like to collect all the things when it comes to coloring mediums. So here is where like I had a new one, and with these you just have to squeeze them until the or the color starts coming through. When you first get them, there's a little plastic band, I've shown that in other videos, that like a neon colored band that you remove, and then you screw on the brush tip back on, and then you squeeze it till the color starts coming out, and then you don't usually need to squeeze it again. With these, if you do squeeze it, you're going to get drips of color, like just pure liquid coming out. So with all of these, for the sake of consistency, I would apply the color from the brush pen to about half of each circle. And then on the other half, I was taking just a clean, wet paintbrush. All it had was clean water on it. Wetting that with the clean water, and then slowly like bringing it over to the color and allowing them to blend. So that way I kind of got a bit of a gradient so I could see how the color looks like straight from the brush, as well as how it, you know, fades out with a bit of water. So it just kind of gives me a better idea depending on, you know, the look I'm going for, what I want, etc. So I kept going along until I had all of these filled in. And then once they're all filled in, I let them dry completely. Once they were dry, I'm going to run these through my die cutting machine with the coordinating wafer die. So there's several coordinating dies for that stamp set. There's this one with the outline. There's also a smaller one that will cut out just the interior of the circles. There's ones for the rectangle swatches. Like, they're just options. So many options depending on what you want to create, how you want to do your swatches, so many things. So with these, I just cut them out of the outlines, and then I used the new Color Combos tag die because it was the perfect size to adhere each one of these. I also could have just adhered all these to like a piece of cardstock and then stuck it in a binder. But with these specifically, I really liked having them as tags. This way I can put them on a little binder ring, and I can actually just keep these with my little container of all of these Aquaflow pens. And each time I go to use them, I've got them right in front of me. I have all the colors laid out, know what they look like, etc. Down the road, I'm probably going to do separate swatches and have them, like, you know, in my little binder that I can flip through depending on, you know, what I'm wanting to create. But for this was perfect. So I went along and just labeled everything just using a little Sharpie fine point pen, just putting the number on the bottom part and then the name of the color. And then later on, I'm going to go back, and on the back of these, I'm going to put which set each of the colors from, because these come in sets of 3. For some people that might not matter, but for me, when I'm, you know, linking to supplies, etc., I need to know, you know, what set this is from. Like, this is from the Merry and Bright set, this is from the Dream and Color set, etc. It just is a lot easier for me to find. So I'll go back later and label the back of these tags with all the different sets that each of these colors is from, so that I just have everything like at my fingertips, because that's also something that just I know that I need to do, and I frustrate myself, and then things take 10 times longer than they need to. So I've super sped all of this up, of course, in editing, but it honestly didn't take that long, because altogether there was like 30 colors. It's not like some of my other collections that shall not be named that have significantly more. But went along, got everything labeled, everything filled out, and then once it was done, of course I couldn't resist making a card, because I had all my colors out, I was inspired, I wanted to play, plus the fact Waffle Flower released another bouquet builder stamp set, which I've been obsessed since the very first release of them. So this is the 5th one in the series, and just love it. So I pulled out my larger MISTI stamp platform for this, because it's a bit of a larger stamp and I wanted the space. I could have done it in my mini MISTI though that I used earlier, but whatever. Anyway, I'm stamping it onto more of the Canson XL watercolor paper, and I used my anti-static powder tool and then just my big Tonic surface sweep brush to brush off that excess powder. And then I am stamping this 2 times with Ink on 3's Juicy Embossing Ink, just because it is such a large stamp and the watercolor paper has a fair bit of texture to it. So I just kind of walk my fingers all over the stamp here, stamp it a couple times with that clear embossing ink, and then I am going to heat emboss this with the Ink on 3 Arctic White embossing powder. And then once this is completely embossed, I'm going to let my heat tool heat up for a few seconds, and then melt all of this until it's smooth, melted, not gritty. You just melt it until it's shiny, and then you stop. Someone was asking me that the other day, why their embossing powder looks it looked dry and dull. It's overheated. You literally just want to heat embossing powders until it is smooth and glossy, and then take the heat away. If you overheat it, it can burn, but almost like sinks into the cardstock and becomes dull. So anywho, did that with the large image. I also stamped, there's more like coordinating flower and leaf images in the set, and I also white heat embossed those to a scrap of that Canson XL watercolor paper. So once I've got them all embossed, I am going to do some very easy, messy watercoloring. I know this makes a lot of people cringe when I do stuff like this, but with these images specifically, it's not going to matter, because I'm going to die cut them with the coordinating dies. So it's not going to look like this. Although I have done other cards in the past where I purposely do the messy watercolor, go outside the lines, make a mess. And I'm not die cutting, like it's just part of the finished look. But it just works. And the thing I really love about this is by just allowing myself not to, you know, stress out so much and concentrate so hard on staying inside the lines and like really just letting the color do its thing. It's freeing, and it's amazing sometimes how things end up looking that you don't expect, because you're just letting it do its thing. Letting it move, let the color do, you know, move around. The only times I'm careful is right here where I was adding pink and it's next to green, because if pink and green mix, you're going to get like really muddy colors. So that's the only time I get a little careful when I'm doing messy watercoloring and letting colors do their thing, is I just try to be a little bit aware though of what colors I'm using, and, you know, just so that you don't end up with just a big muddy mess. So it's messy, but slightly controlled within reason. So I did the first one, and then these littler images, I use the same exact colors. And the thing I really like about this set is these two flowers are the exact same shape and size. They don't have the line details as the ones in the bouquet. And then you've got these little extra leaves and whatnot. So I watercolored everything and then let these completely dry first, because you definitely want them dry before you run things like this through your die cutting machine, because either the washi tape could end up tearing things, or, you know, the die is not going to cut properly if the cardstock or the watercolor paper is still wet. So you always want to make sure everything's completely dry. So once that was dry, I taped all my dies into place with just washi tape, and then I ran all of this through my die cut machine. And this one, like several of the other floral sets from Waffle Flower, die cuts not only the outline, but like tons, like not just a few of the inner pieces, but tons of just little random like inner pieces, you know, the dead space basically. So I popped all those little bits out, and then I also die cut some white cardstock with the Shutters panel wafer die. This was part of last month's release. And then the sentiment is from the PEONY Notes stamp set, and I had white heat embossed that onto black cardstock, and there's actually a coordinating die for that, so I die cut it as well. So I've got kind of everything ready for the front of the card, but for the inside of the card, I was gonna just stamp the large floral cluster, and in my head I'm like, okay, I need to find a bunch of, you know, choose which inks I want to use, like distress inks, etc., in colors that are similar. And then I decided to try something. I have never done it with these before, and I know they're not meant to be used this way, especially as a brush tip like this. But I decided to stamp with the Aquaflow markers, like just in a way I've shown very similar ideas, either just inking up stamps with, you know, distress inks or other markers, different things like that. And the biggest thing with these is a lot of times you're not going to get the coverage you would want, etc. But because these are more of line images, and I also plan on spraying them really, really lightly, like just a couple light mists of water, to let the colors kind of flow and reactivate them. And then this is also going on the inside of my card, so I'm not as particular. It doesn't have to be as perfect. So I just work lightest to darkest, so that I don't end up like, you know, mixing or muddying any colors in the brush. And just kind of scribble all the colors in the same areas using the same colors that I used on the outside of the card. And then I very lightly misted this just a couple times with my Nuvo spray bottle, and then stamped that on the inside of the card. And it turned out even better than I expected it would. It turned out really nice, and I was like, huh, now I kind of want to do that on the outside of a second card. Didn't have time for it, but one of these days, because it was like, oh, this worked really well. So I let that dry, and then I adhered the Shutters panel die cut to the front of the card. Just white on white, very boring, but I wanted just that little bit of like texture without it being very distracting, since I wanted, like, obviously the bouquet to be the center of attention. So adhered that with just the Nuvo liquid glue, and then I'm also adhering the bouquet, same thing, just adhering it flat to the card base. And then once I've got it adhered, I am going to trim off the pieces that are hanging off the edges with my scissors. If you don't want to do that and you like leaving it out, it depends on my mood, whether I leave the pieces on or whether I cut them off. If I leave them on, I'm either going to hand deliver this or include it in a gift bag sort of a situation, or I'll mail it in a bigger card, like envelope, like a 5x7 envelope or a padded envelope or whatever. But if, like in this case, if you want it to fit in a A2 envelope, you got to trim off the little pieces that are hanging off the edges and whatnot for it to fit. So, or you could fold them over. I don't like doing that though, because then it ruins the finished look. But anyway, it's all up to personal preference. So I adhered those, and then the extra flowers and the leaves I adhered with little bits of Big Mama foam tape from Simon Says Stamp, just to pop them up for that little extra bit of definition. I did the same thing with the sentiment. And then as my final little bit of embellishment, I pulled out all the packs of Waffle Flowers enamel dots. I have the Up and Running, the Clean and Clear, and the Stardust, and just sprinkled these rather liberally around my card. I added, you know, some yellow ones, a purple one, a green one, some of the clear ones, which end up looking like little dewdrops, and then a few of the little white sparkly ones as well, just cuz. So sprinkle those on my card, and then that finished it off. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I will have links below the video to my blog post. This is part of a blog hop, like I had mentioned, so there's giveaways and tons of inspiration and tons of ideas and tips and tricks and all that stuff with all the swatch sets and everything. So you can check that out below if you're interested, as well as all the supplies. Thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.